was introduced to modernize India's arbitral framework and align it with global standards. Now, why was the need to reform? The earlier regime, it was procedurally rigid, like I mentioned. It was court-driven and extremely time-consuming, which sort of derails the entire purpose of arbitration. If courts are going to get involved in arbitration, in every step of arbitration, if you need an interim relief, you have to run to the court. If there is some procedural defect, you have to run to the court, and the tribunal didn't have the liberty to sort of solve these issues on their own, and it we found that people were running to court for every little thing, which created a large backlog because one, courts were already burdened. Number two, it would take a lot of time for them to look into the aspect, to look into the matter, and come up with a solution which would then, benefit in arbitration. So it was extremely time consuming. There was no comprehensive legal framework which sort of guided the arbitration. So parties, other stakeholders were quite lost in the entire process because there was no proper framework. There were no timelines assigned for arbitration, making it a very cumbersome process. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of uncertainty, which is why people didn't generally opt for arbitration at that point. And there was also a need for economic liberalization for a reliable and efficient dispute resolution mechanism, especially for cross-border trade. So these were the reasons why they introduced the Arbitration Act of 1996. Now, how did they come about to bring the 1996 Act into effect with all its changes? So the UN Citral models, which is the model law which exists, it's called UN Citral Model Laws of 1985, and there's the UN Citral Conciliation Rules of 1980. The object was to ensure uniformity with international arbitration practices. So our Arbitration Act as it stands today is called the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. There are four parts. There is part one, which deals with arbitration. There is part two, which deals with enforcement of arbitral awards, where your New York Convention and your Geneva Conventions come into force. Then you have part three, which also deals with conciliation. So all of these factors were brought in to make one concise act where alternative dispute resolution can be dealt with. Now, what were the key objects of this act? One was to cover domestic, international commercial arbitration as well as conciliation. It was to bring about efficiency and flexibility in procedure because, like I mentioned, under the 1940 Act, it was extremely rigid. If you just look for a comparison between the 1940 Act and the